She woke up before the sun that morning, the faint light just starting to touch the edges of the small, cramped apartment she called home. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and the lingering scent of yesterday's bread. She rubbed her eyes and tried to shake off the heaviness of sleep. Her body ached from the long hours of work, but her mind was already restless, thinking about what the day might bring. Another day of waiting tables, another day of people who barely noticed her smile, another day of trying to get by. She got dressed in her plain uniform, worn but clean, and tied her hair back in a simple ponytail. Every movement felt automatic, like she had done it 1,000 times before. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror and sighed. She had dreams, big dreams, but in this world, dreams didn't pay rent or buy groceries. She thought about the piano she had practiced on the night before, sitting quietly in her tiny living room. His keys were slightly chipped, some notes didn't sound perfect, but to her it was everything. That piano had been her companion through years of hardship, the only place where her feelings made sense, where she could speak without words, and where she could truly be herself. She left her apartment, stepping out into the early morning chill. The streets were still waking up. Shopkeepers rolled up their shutters, the smell of fresh bread and frying onions mixed in the air, and the faint rumble of buses and motorcycles could be heard in the distance. She carried herself with careful steps, trying to conserve energy for the day ahead. Her hands were rough from work, but they had once danced across piano keys with a grace that many never imagined she had. She remembered the hours she had spent teaching herself to play, long after school and late into the night when everyone else was asleep. The cafe where she worked was not far from her apartment. By the time she arrived, it was starting to fill with the early morning crowd. She greeted her coworkers with a tired smile, received a few nods in return, and then got to work. Orders came in quickly: coffee, toast, sandwiches, small talks, rushed conversations. Her mind, however, was elsewhere. She thought about the little flyer she had seen pinned to the community board the week before, a local music event that welcomed new performers. She had stared at it for hours, her heart beating faster with every glance. The thought of performing in front of an audience, of letting people hear her play, made her chest feel tight with a mix of excitement and fear. All day, she moved from table to table, serving drinks and meals with practiced ease. Some customers were kind, leaving generous tips and polite smiles. Others were impatient, speaking harshly, expecting the world to revolve around their needs. She nodded, smiled, and apologized when necessary, all while feeling the weight of her own thoughts pressing down. The piano kept calling to her from the corners of her mind, whispering promises of a life beyond these walls. Finally, her shift ended. She collected her things, waved a quiet goodbye to her coworkers, and stepped back into the streets. The afternoon sun had started to warm the city, and the chatter of people walking, cars honking, and children laughing filled the air. She clutched her bag tightly. Inside, she had packed a small notebook, a few coins, and her confidence, fragile as it was. Today she had made up her mind. She would go to that event. Even if it was just a chance, a single fleeting moment, she had to try. Walking toward the venue, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear tightening in her chest. The building was bigger than she expected, with banners announcing the talent showcase and tables set up for judges and guests. She paused at the entrance, watching people move in and out. They were laughing, talking, carrying instruments, chatting as if the world belonged to them. She felt a pang of doubt. She was not like them. She had no connections, no fancy instruments, no shiny attire. All she had was her talent and the belief that one day, someone would hear her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. The first obstacle came almost immediately. One of the organizers, a tall man with a clipboard and sharp eyes, noticed her hesitating at the entrance. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was polite but firm, and there was a hint of impatience in his tone. I'd like to perform," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I saw the flyer about the showcase. I'd like to play." The man glanced at her from head to toe, his eyes lingering on her simple clothes and worn shoes. "You can't perform here," he said flatly. She froze. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her heart raced, and she struggled to keep her composure. I can play. Please, just a few minutes. I'm sorry, he interrupted, shaking his head. We have our performers. You're not on the list. You can't just show up and expect to play. She felt her shoulders slump, the weight of disappointment pressing down hard. She had rehearsed, practiced, dreamed about this moment for weeks, and now it was slipping through her fingers. Tears threatened to come, but she blinked them away. She couldn't let them see her cry. Not here. Not now. Turning away, she wandered to the side of the building, leaning against a wall. The crowd inside could be heard laughing, chatting, applauding, unaware of her struggle. She felt invisible, small, and foolish. For a moment, she wondered if it was all pointless, if her dreams were just childish fantasies that had no place in the real world. But then, she closed her eyes and remembered the piano, the hours she had spent alone, the melodies that had flowed from her fingers, the joy and sorrow she had poured into every note. The music didn't care about appearances, money, or status. The music only cared that she played. She could feel the rhythm of her heart matching the rhythm of the notes in her mind. And in that moment, a quiet determination settled in her chest. She would find a way to play. Somehow, she spotted a small, old piano tucked away near a corner of the venue, used for decoration when the event wasn't happening. It was chipped and slightly out of tune, but it called to her. She approached it cautiously, her hands trembling with anticipation. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the familiar resistance and warmth. The sound was not perfect, but it was enough. She began to play softly at first, almost as if testing the waters. A simple melody, sweet and tentative, filled the small space. Then, as her confidence grew, her hands moved faster, her fingers dancing over the keys with precision and emotion. Each note carried her feelings, her frustration, her hope, her longing, her courage. She played as if the entire world were listening, even if no one was. Passers-by began to stop. First one, then two, then a small group, drawn by the music that seemed to rise above the noise of the city. They watched quietly, their faces softening as they realized how beautiful the playing was. She didn't notice them at first. She was lost in the music, in the story she was telling through each note. The rejection, the long hours, the hardships, they all poured out of her fingers. She had never played for anyone like this before. Not formally, not with an audience. Yet the connection was immediate. The music spoke where words could not. And slowly, the crowd outside began to grow. People whispered to each other, pointing at the small, determined figure at the piano, playing as if her life depended on it. Some took out their phones, capturing the moment, unable to believe the talent they had stumbled upon. Inside, the event continued, oblivious to the scene forming just outside. But outside, something magical was happening. Her music was breaking barriers, ignoring rules, ignoring rejection. For a brief moment she was free. Free from judgment, free from doubt, free from the constraints that had weighed on her for so long. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the streets, she played on, each note stronger than the last, her spirit unbroken. The world may have told her she couldn't, but her music was saying yes. Yes to courage. Yes to hope. Yes to the dream that refused to die, no matter how hard life tried to crush it. And at that moment, she realized something she had always known but never fully believed. Sometimes the most powerful stage is not the one you are allowed to stand on, but the one you create for yourself. The notes of her piano playing floated through the narrow alley beside the venue, soft at first, then growing louder as her confidence built. People passing by began to slow down, drawn to the unexpected melody. Some had been walking quickly, focused on errands in their phones, but the music stopped them in their tracks. It was strange how something so simple, just a woman and an old piano, could make the world around her feel different, lighter, almost magical. She noticed a few faces peeking through the windows of the venue. Their expressions were a mix of surprise and curiosity. A young man with a camera pulled out his phone and began recording, whispering excitedly to a friend. "Who is that?" he said, barely moving his lips. The friend shook her head. "I don't know, but listen to that playing. It's amazing." Despite the growing attention, the woman didn't stop. Her fingers moved quickly, almost dancing, as she played melodies she had kept hidden for years. Some tunes were soft and gentle, like a lullaby, while others were fierce and passionate, carrying the weight of her struggles and her unspoken hopes. Every note seemed to tell a story, one of longing, of hardship, of resilience. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, as if the music was not only escaping from her fingers, but also filling the empty spaces inside her. People began to gather around, forming a loose circle, whispering and pointing. A man with a coffee cup stopped mid-step, his eyes wide. "I didn't expect to see anything like this today," he muttered to the person beside him. Children paused, tilting their heads, listening with rapt attention, while older men and women shared astonished looks. Nobody said much at first, they just listened, letting the music take over their thoughts. The woman's heart began to pound, not with fear this time, but with excitement. She could feel that something was happening, that people were noticing her talent. Every time she struck a key, she felt more confident. She dared to play faster, to add more complexity to her melodies, and to experiment with rhythms she had never tried in public before. Each variation drew more attention, and soon, whispers of admiration began to spread through the crowd. Inside the venue, the organizers were preparing for the main performances. The tall man with the clipboard, the same one who had told her she couldn't perform, glanced toward the windows and frowned. He squinted, trying to understand the soft murmurs and the shifting crowd outside. "What's going on out there?" he asked one of his assistants. The assistant shook her head, uncertain. "I don't know. It looks like someone is playing music, but it's not on the schedule." Curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped toward the side of the building. As he looked through the window, he froze. There she was, playing the old piano with an intensity that made him blink in disbelief. He could see her fingers moving effortlessly, creating melodies that were beautiful, complex, and full of emotion. The crowd outside had grown, a mixture of locals and visitors, all watching silently, mesmerized by what they were hearing. The man rubbed his eyes and shook his head. "Impossible," he muttered. He knew he had made a mistake. He had dismissed her because she didn't fit the usual image of a performer. She wasn't dressed in fancy clothes, didn't carry an instrument in a case, and hadn't applied formally. Yet here she was, commanding the attention of an entire crowd with nothing but her skill and her courage. Back outside, the music continued, and the crowd continued to swell. People who had been walking past, initially in a hurry, now lingered. Some took photos, others filmed videos, and many just stood silently, captivated by the unexpected performance. One older woman whispered to her companion, "She has something special, something I've never heard before." Her companion nodded, eyes wide, clearly agreeing. The woman noticed the growing crowd but remained focused on the music. She had always loved performing alone, but this was different. The energy around her was electric, yet it didn't distract her. She could feel the hearts of the listeners, their reactions, and she let it guide her playing. The music became a conversation between her and everyone present, a dialogue that needed no words. Suddenly, a little boy in the front of the crowd clapped, shyly at first, then more confidently. His applause broke the tension and the initial silence of awe, and soon others joined in. One by one, hands began to clap, soft at first, then louder and more rhythmic. The sound encouraged her, filling her with warmth. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile, and continued to play, each note now more confident, more daring, more alive. The tall organizer watched, torn between pride and embarrassment. He had been so sure that she didn't belong here. Now he couldn't deny her talent. He had underestimated her because of appearances, and the realization stung. Yet at the same time he felt something else, admiration. He hadn't expected to witness such raw skill, such passion, and such fearlessness from someone who had been rejected so quickly. Outside, the crowd began to grow even more. People who were already in the event began spilling out, drawn by the music. Vendors stopped serving customers, pedestrians paused, and even a few people who had been busy on their phones looked up, captivated by the sound. The music had stopped being just notes from a piano. It had become a force that commanded attention, demanded recognition, and inspired awe. The woman didn't think about the growing attention. She didn't worry about what the organizers might say or how the crowd was reacting. She played because it was the only thing that mattered. Every hardship, every long shift, every moment of doubt, all seemed to disappear when her fingers touched the keys. The music was her voice, her way of speaking to the world when words were not enough. A man in the crowd, clearly a professional musician, whispered to his friend, "I've never heard anything like this in my life. Look at her technique. Look at her expression. She's incredible." His friend nodded, equally impressed. "She deserves to be on stage," the friend said. "She shouldn't be playing on some old piano in the corner." The woman's playing became more complex, flowing seamlessly from one melody to another. She began to add subtle variations, experimenting with rhythm and dynamics. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized, as if each note held a story they were desperate to understand. Some people had tears in their eyes, touched by the sincerity and depth of her performance. Others smiled, feeling joy and hope rise inside them. Inside the venue, the tall man finally stepped outside, unable to ignore the scene any longer. He approached the piano cautiously, not wanting to interrupt, but needing to see for himself. He watched her play, his previous judgment fading with every note. He realized that talent could not be measured by appearances, by lists, or by formality. Talent, he now understood, was something deeper, something undeniable, something that demanded recognition. The woman finished a particularly emotional piece, the final notes lingering in the air like a gentle echo. The crowd stood silently for a moment, absorbing what they had just experienced. Then, almost simultaneously, they erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, joyous, and genuine. It was not the polite clapping of a formal audience. It was raw, spontaneous, and heartfelt. People cheered, whistled, and shouted words of encouragement. She looked up from the piano, her chest heaving, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had never felt anything like this before. The music had carried her beyond fear, beyond doubt, beyond the limits she had set for herself. She realized that even though she had been rejected, even though she had been told she couldn't perform, she had found a way to make herself heard. The organizer, standing a few feet away, watched silently. He approached slowly, unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but respectful. I was wrong. You should have been on that stage. I can't believe we overlooked you." She paused, considering his words. She didn't feel anger, only a quiet sense of satisfaction. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "The music speaks for itself." The crowd, sensing the tension between the two adults, continued to cheer, encouraging her to play more. She smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never known. For the first time, she felt that maybe the world could see her for who she truly was. Not just a waitress or a stranger, but a musician, a storyteller, a force to be reckoned with. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, she played one final piece. It was soft, gentle, and filled with hope. The crowd listened in awe, savoring every note, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. She ended with a flourish, letting the last note linger in the air as if it were a promise. The applause that followed was deafening. People clapped, cheered, and some even wiped away tears. Cameras flashed, videos were being recorded, and the buzz of excitement filled the air. She realized that her performance had become something bigger than herself. It was no longer just a private moment of triumph. It was a message to everyone who had ever been told they couldn't, a story of courage and perseverance. She stood, a little trembling, a little overwhelmed, but smiling. She had taken the first step into a new world, one note at a time. And she knew, with certainty, that this was only the beginning. The applause faded slowly, leaving a soft echo that hung in the air like the final notes of a song. She sat at the piano for a moment, her fingers hovering above the keys, as if savoring the lingering magic of what had just happened. The crowd remained, lingering, not wanting to leave, captivated by the unexpected performance they had witnessed. People whispered among themselves, pointing at her, nodding, and shaking their heads in disbelief. For a few moments, she allowed herself to breathe, letting the thrill of the moment settle in her chest. Her heart was still racing, and her palms tingled from the touch of the keys. She had played her music, and the world had listened. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. Could it be possible that something she had done alone, quietly, could touch so many strangers in such a profound way? Slowly, the crowd began to approach her, some with hesitant smiles, some with wide eyes full of admiration. A young man stepped forward, holding out his hand. "That was incredible," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I've never heard anything like it. You have to play on the main stage. You belong there." She shook her head gently, a soft smile on her lips. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said quietly. "They told me I couldn't perform. I didn't even expect anyone to notice me." The man looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. "Well, you proved them wrong," he said. "And you proved something to all of us too. Talent like yours, it doesn't go unnoticed for long." Others began to step forward, offering words of encouragement. A woman in her 50s patted her shoulder lightly. "Don't ever doubt yourself," she said. "You have a gift. Keep sharing it." Children ran up to her, shyly clapping their hands, their eyes sparkling with wonder. She knelt down, smiling at them, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Inside the venue, the tall organizer finally stepped out fully, clearing a small path through the crowd. He had watched from the edge for too long, too stunned to act. Now, he approached her cautiously, his face a mix of embarrassment and awe. I was wrong," he admitted, his voice low. "We shouldn't have dismissed you. You have a talent that cannot be ignored." She looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "I don't need your approval," she said softly. "The music speaks for itself." He nodded, realizing that she was right. Words alone couldn't capture the power of what she had just done. He gestured toward the main stage. "If you're willing, we want you to perform officially. On the main stage, in front of everyone." Her heart skipped a beat. She had imagined this moment countless times in her mind, but never dared to believe it would actually happen. She looked at the piano, at the crowd that had gathered, and then back at the man. I'll do it," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. The crowd erupted again, cheering and clapping, their excitement growing as the news spread. Phones were raised to capture the moment, cameras clicked, and voices shouted words of encouragement. People who had just been strangers now felt connected to her, drawn in by the sincerity and beauty of her music. As she prepared to move to the main stage, she felt a surge of nerves. This was different from playing alone or even in a small group. This was a stage, a spotlight, hundreds of eyes watching, waiting, expecting something extraordinary. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that the music was always her guide. She had trusted it before, and it had never failed her. The walk to the stage felt surreal. She passed the crowd, their cheers lifting her spirits and filling her with energy. Some people reached out to touch her hand, to offer encouragement, and she smiled, waving gently. Every step seemed to affirm that she was finally where she was meant to be. When she reached the stage, she paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The venue was larger than she had imagined. The stage was set with lights, microphones, and instruments. The audience was seated, a sea of faces waiting in anticipation. The hum of chatter quieted as the announcer stepped forward. "And now," the announcer said, "we have a very special performer. She wasn't on the schedule, but sometimes talent cannot wait. Please welcome her to the stage. The crowd erupted again, their applause filling the room. She stepped forward, her hands brushing over the keys of the grand piano set at the center. The lights warmed her face, the eyes of the audience fixed on her, and she felt a flutter of fear, quickly replaced by determination. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the room settle over her. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing, the late nights, the struggles, the doubts, and the hope. All of it had led to this moment. Slowly, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but confident enough to fill the room. The audience listened, immediately captivated. The music flowed naturally, rising and falling, carrying with it a story of struggle, hope, and triumph. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, as if they had a mind of their own, telling a tale that transcended words. As the melody grew, so did the intensity of the performance. She added flourishes and variations, letting the emotion guide her fingers. The room was silent except for the music, and every listener leaned in, drawn into her story. Some had tears in their eyes, others had smiles, and many were simply breathless, unable to believe the talent before them. The organizers watched from the side, now fully aware of the mistake they had made in dismissing her. They whispered among themselves, shaking their heads in awe. The audience, too, was in disbelief, captivated by the raw beauty of her playing. It was more than a performance, it was a revelation. She had never felt such a strong connection with an audience before. It was as if every note she played was understood, felt, and appreciated by everyone in the room. She felt free, empowered, and alive. Every ounce of fear that had lingered in her heart dissolved, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. As the piece reached its climax, the room seemed to hold its breath. The music soared, powerful and emotional, filling every corner of the venue. The audience was silent, completely absorbed, until the final note rang out and echoed, lingering in the air like a promise. For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It started with a few hands clapping, then more until the entire room erupted. People were cheering, whistling, and shouting words of praise. Phones captured the moment, flashes lit up the stage, and the energy of the crowd was electric. She opened her eyes, tears threatening to spill, but she smiled. She had done it. She had turned rejection into triumph. The music that had lived in her heart for so long had finally been heard by the world. She realized, in that moment, that talent and perseverance could break barriers, even when others doubted her. The tall organizer stepped forward once more, clapping alongside the audience. His face was a mix of awe and humility. He approached her after the applause, his voice soft but sincere. "I can't believe we almost missed this. You are extraordinary. Thank you for showing us what true talent looks like." She nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and pride. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she said, her voice calm but emotional. "I only needed the music to guide me." The audience continued to cheer, some standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. People who had doubted her, or had dismissed her earlier, were now part of the crowd celebrating her success. It was a moment that no one would forget, a story of courage, resilience, and the power of following one's dream. As she left the stage later, she felt lighter than she had in years. Her heart was full, her spirit renewed, and her mind buzzing with possibilities. This was more than a performance. It was a turning point. She had proven to herself and to the world that she belonged. Outside the venue, the crowd lingered, still talking about the performance. Some had already shared videos online, others were spreading the story to friends. The buzz was growing, and she realized that this was only the beginning. Doors that had seemed closed were now opening, and the future felt full of promise. She walked home that night, the cool evening air brushing against her face, thinking about how far she had come. She had faced rejection, doubt, and fear, but she had not given up. She had followed her heart, trusted her talent, and allowed her passion to shine. And now the world had listened. As she entered her small apartment, she sat at her piano once more, not to perform, but to reflect. She played a few quiet notes, savoring the sound, the feeling, the memory of the audience's reaction. This was her life, her journey, and she knew that this was only the first of many moments to come. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely certain of one thing. No one could silence her, as long as she continued to play. After the performance, the room was buzzing with energy. The audience could not stop talking about her, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others still replaying the music in their minds. People crowded near the stage, exchanging stories of how unexpectedly amazing her performance had been. It was the kind of moment that didn't fade quickly. It lingered in the air, like the last note of a song that refuses to leave your ears. She stepped away from the piano, feeling her legs tremble from the intensity of playing and from the rush of emotions that had been building inside her for weeks. Her hands still tingled from the touch of the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed in the sound of the applause and cheers. She felt a mixture of relief and awe. It was one thing to dream about performing, but it was completely different to have the world respond with such appreciation and recognition. The organizers, who had initially told her she couldn't perform, gathered nearby. They whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that mixed embarrassment, admiration, and shock. The tall man who had first dismissed her approached cautiously, trying to find the right words. I owe you an apology," he said. "We made a huge mistake by not letting you perform earlier. Your talent is beyond anything I've ever seen." She nodded, not looking angry, but calm and composed. "It's all right," she said softly. "I didn't come here for approval. I came to play and I did. That's enough for me." The man hesitated, then smiled, genuinely impressed. "You've inspired everyone here," he said, "and I think this is only the beginning. I want to make sure you get every opportunity from now on." Her heart fluttered. She had spent so long being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, that the idea of someone acknowledging her talent and offering support felt almost unreal. But she knew better than to let excitement cloud her focus. She had to take things one step at a time. Still, the thought of doors opening gave her hope she had not felt in years. The crowd continued to murmur and clap, and many came forward to congratulate her personally. A few people handed her business cards, invitations, and offers to connect her with music teachers, event organizers, and even small recording studios. Every interaction was overwhelming, yet inspiring. She realized that her single performance had started something much larger than herself. Outside the venue, the street was crowded with people who had come to watch, drawn by the sound of her piano earlier. The buzz from social media was already spreading. Phones were recording every detail, people were sharing videos, and comments praising her talent were appearing in real time. She felt the weight of this sudden attention but tried to focus on the music, the part of herself that had always been true and unshakable. A young man approached her, holding a small notebook filled with sketches and song lyrics. "I think your music has a story that should be shared," he said. "Would you like to collaborate on something? We could make something beautiful together." She looked at him, considering his offer. She didn't know where it might lead, but the idea of working with someone who appreciated her talent was exciting. "Yes," she said finally, smiling. "I'd like that." Throughout the evening, more and more people approached her, drawn by her music, by her story, and by the courage she had shown. She realized that it was not just the music itself that had captivated them. It was the honesty, the vulnerability, and the determination she had shown. Every note had carried her journey, every melody had told her story, and people had recognized it. The tall organizer came forward once more, this time with a serious expression. "There's an opportunity for you to perform at a larger event next month," he said. "A venue that hosts musicians from all over the city. You'd be the opening act. Are you interested?" She hesitated, weighing her options. It was a bigger stage, more pressure, but also a chance to reach more people. She thought about the countless nights she had spent practicing alone, the sacrifices, the doubts, the rejections. And she knew that the answer was clear. Yes, she said, determination shining in her eyes. I want to do it. As the night progressed, she found herself surrounded by new friends, mentors, and supporters. Musicians approached her, offering advice and encouragement. Event organizers wanted to meet with her and discuss future opportunities. She had never imagined this kind of attention, this kind of recognition, and it was overwhelming yet empowering. In a quiet corner of the venue, she finally had a moment to reflect. She sat down on a bench, letting the sounds of the room wash over her. The excitement, the applause, and the energy were incredible, but what she cherished most was the realization that she had trusted herself and her music. She had not let rejection stop her, and now, her perseverance was being rewarded in ways she had never dreamed of. Her mind wandered back to the piano she had practiced on in her small apartment, the one that had been her constant companion through years of struggle. That piano had been silent witness to her dreams, her frustrations, and her dedication. And now, standing on this stage with real people acknowledging her talent, she felt that all those hours had been worth it. Every note, every late night, every lonely practice session had led her to this moment. The crowd began to disperse, but many stayed to speak with her, ask questions, and share their own stories. She listened patiently, offering smiles and gratitude. She realized that her story, her music, had inspired others in ways she hadn't imagined. People approached her with tears in their eyes, saying how much her performance had moved them, how it had reminded them of their own dreams, and how it had given them hope. One older man, who had been sitting quietly in the back, came forward with a gentle smile. You have a gift, he said, but more than that, you have courage. That combination is rare. Never let anyone take that from you. She nodded, deeply touched by his words. They stayed in her mind, a reminder that talent alone was not enough. Courage, perseverance, and belief in oneself were equally important. As the night drew to a close, she found herself walking home under the soft glow of streetlights. The cool evening air brushed against her face, carrying with it the sounds of the city and the distant echoes of music. Her heart was full, her spirit renewed, and her mind buzzing with possibilities. She thought about the people she had met, the connections she had made, and the opportunities that awaited her. She realized that this performance had not just been about music. It had been about proving to herself that she could overcome obstacles, that she could be seen and heard, and that her passion mattered. She had turned rejection into opportunity, and her courage had opened doors she had never imagined possible. By the time she reached her apartment, she was tired, but it was a good kind of tired, one that comes from accomplishment and fulfillment. She sat down at her small piano, letting her fingers brush over the keys. She played softly, not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. The music was a reflection of her journey, of everything she had endured and achieved. And in that quiet moment, she felt a profound sense of peace. The night passed quietly, but she knew that her life had changed. The performance had been a turning point, a moment that would be remembered not just by her, but by everyone who had witnessed it. And though the road ahead would still have challenges, she felt ready to face them. She had proven to herself that talent, dedication, and courage could overcome even the harshest obstacles. She thought about the future with a sense of hope and excitement. There would be more performances, more audiences, more opportunities to share her music. But no matter what happened, she knew that this moment, the night she had been told she couldn't perform, yet had silenced the crowd with her music, would remain a defining point in her life. She smiled to herself, letting the music flow freely, each note a promise to continue, to grow, and to share her gift with the world. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt that she was on the right path. She had found her voice, her courage, and her stage, and nothing, not even doubt or rejection, could take that away from her. The next morning, she woke up with the faint light of dawn spilling into her small apartment. Her body ached slightly from the long performance the night before, but her mind was wide awake, filled with anticipation and excitement. The applause, the cheers, the whispers of admiration. They were still alive in her memory, playing over and over like a melody that refused to fade. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and exhilarated. Today, she had meetings and preparations for the larger event that the organizer had promised. She made herself a simple breakfast, the aroma of toasted bread and tea filling the room. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She replayed the events of the previous night, the way the crowd had reacted, the encouragement from strangers, and the small, quiet sense of triumph she had felt. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, truly seen, and it was intoxicating. By mid-morning, she was out the door, walking toward the venue where she was to meet the organizer and some of the other event coordinators. Her steps were careful, but her heart raced. She had prepared herself for rejection, for doubt, for someone telling her she wasn't ready. But she was learning that sometimes, courage and talent could change everything, even in the face of uncertainty. When she arrived, she was greeted warmly by the organizer, who seemed genuinely happy to see her. "I've spoken to some people," he said, smiling. "They want to meet you. There are producers, music teachers, and a few event coordinators who are very interested in your talent." She blinked, slightly overwhelmed. "They want to meet me?" she asked, barely believing it. "Yes," he said. "Your performance last night was unforgettable. We need to make sure it doesn't go unnoticed." Her stomach fluttered, a mix of nerves and excitement. She had dreamed of this kind of recognition, but now that it was happening, it felt almost surreal. The reality of her talent being acknowledged in such a public way was both thrilling and daunting. They began introducing her to several people, each with different ideas, questions, and suggestions. One producer wanted to talk about a small recording session to capture her music professionally. Another event coordinator asked if she could participate in an upcoming showcase for emerging artists. Music teachers offered guidance and mentorship, seeing the potential she had worked so hard to develop. She listened carefully to each person, nodding, asking questions, and taking mental notes. Each conversation made her more aware of the possibilities ahead, of the doors that had suddenly begun to open. Despite the excitement, she felt a little nervous. There was a weight of expectation now that hadn't been there before. People were counting on her to succeed, to make the most of her talent. The applause from the previous night had been spontaneous, joyous, and free from pressure. This was different. Now she had to think about preparation, performance, and the professional world she was stepping into. The organizer noticed her hesitation and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "You're talented, and people want to help you grow. Just be yourself, and let the music guide you." She nodded, grateful for the support. It reminded her of why she loved music in the first place. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about expression, connection, and the joy of creating something beautiful. She had been so focused on surviving that she had almost forgotten this truth. Now, with the world opening its doors, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Over the next few days, she attended meetings, rehearsals, and small workshops. Each experience taught her something new, not just about music, but about herself. She learned to trust her instincts, to manage her nerves, and to communicate with others in a professional setting. Every person she met was inspired by her story, her dedication, and her resilience. They wanted to help her succeed, and she welcomed their guidance while staying true to her own voice. One afternoon, after a long meeting with a music producer, she walked through the city streets, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about the countless nights she had spent practicing alone, the hours of doubt and struggle, and the many times she had been dismissed or overlooked. Each step had led her here, and now the possibilities were endless. She felt a quiet sense of pride and satisfaction, knowing that she had not given up, even when the world seemed to be telling her she couldn't succeed. That evening, she returned to her apartment and sat at her small piano. She closed her eyes and played a simple melody, letting her emotions flow freely. It was a moment of reflection, of grounding herself amidst the whirlwind of attention and opportunity. She realized that no matter what happened next, the music was always hers, and it would always guide her. A few days later, she received a call from the organizer with exciting news. "We've arranged for you to perform at a citywide talent showcase next month," he said. "It's a big event with media coverage and a live audience. This could be your chance to reach thousands of people." Her heart raced. Thousands of people? She had never imagined performing for such a large audience. The thought was thrilling but also terrifying. She could feel the pressure building, the expectation, and the responsibility to make every note perfect. Yet, beneath the nerves, there was determination. She knew she could do it. She had already faced rejection, doubt, and uncertainty, and she had overcome it. This was just the next step. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. She practiced tirelessly, refining her pieces, experimenting with new melodies, and learning to project her music with confidence. She also received guidance from the music teachers and producers she had met, learning techniques to enhance her performance and stage presence. Each day, she grew more confident, more skilled, and more ready to face the larger audience that awaited her. Throughout it all, she remained humble and focused. She remembered the people who had dismissed her, the struggles she had faced, and the quiet determination that had driven her this far. She knew that her journey was not just about talent, but about perseverance, resilience, and staying true to herself. Each note she played carried a piece of her story, a testament to the hard work and courage that had brought her here. On the day of the citywide showcase, she arrived early at the venue, a large auditorium filled with anticipation and energy. The stage was set, the lights bright, and the audience buzzing with excitement. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had faced challenges before and had come out stronger each time. She could do this. She belonged here, and the music would guide her. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt a rush of adrenaline. The audience erupted into applause, welcoming her warmly. She smiled, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the silence settle over her. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft and gentle, drawing the audience in. Slowly, the melody grew, each note more confident than the last. The audience listened, captivated, as her music filled the auditorium. Every key she pressed carried her story. The struggles, the hope, the determination, and the joy of finally being heard. The sound resonated, not just through the room, but through every heart present. People in the audience were moved to tears, to laughter, to smiles. Some whispered to each other, amazed at the skill and emotion she displayed. Others sat in stunned silence, completely absorbed by the performance. She felt the energy of the room, the connection between her music and the listeners, and it gave her strength. As she played, she realized that this was more than a performance. It was a moment of triumph, a statement that talent and perseverance could overcome any obstacle. She had been told she couldn't, dismissed and overlooked, but here she was, captivating an audience on a stage she had once dreamed about. Every note was a victory, every melody a testament to her courage and dedication. The climax of her performance arrived, and the music soared with power and emotion. The audience was spellbound, their attention fully captured. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, telling a story that words could never convey. She felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, joy, and relief, knowing that all her hard work had led to this moment. As the final note lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence, a collective breath held in awe. Then, the audience erupted into applause, standing, cheering, and shouting their admiration. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and the room was filled with an energy that was almost tangible. She had done it. She had truly silenced the doubts, proven her worth, and inspired everyone present. After the performance, she received congratulations from organizers, fellow musicians, and audience members. People praised her skill, her emotion, and her courage. She was offered opportunities for further performances, recording sessions, and collaborations. Her life had changed in ways she had never imagined, all because she had dared to play when told she couldn't. That night, Walking home under the quiet glow of the city lights, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the rejection, the doubts, the long nights of practice, and the small victories along the way. She realized that each challenge had prepared her for this moment, had strengthened her resolve, and had shaped her into the musician she had become. Sitting at her piano later that night, she played quietly, not for an audience, but for herself. The notes flowed effortlessly, a reflection of everything she had learned, experienced, and overcome. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The music was hers, and it had the power to touch others, to inspire, and to create change. She knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had the courage, the skill, and the determination to face whatever came next. She had found her voice, her stage, and her purpose, and nothing could take that away from her. The day of the big event finally arrived. The citywide showcase was bustling with energy, with crowds streaming in from every direction. She felt a nervous excitement in her chest that was both familiar and thrilling. The memory of being told she couldn't perform still lingered, but it no longer frightened her. Instead, it fueled her determination. She had come too far, worked too hard, and now, she was ready to show the world the full measure of her talent. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Musicians tuned instruments, stagehands adjusted lights, and performers whispered last-minute encouragements to one another. She took a deep breath, letting the hum of activity wash over her. Despite the nerves, she felt ready. Every rehearsal, every performance, every moment of doubt had led her to this very stage. She trusted the music and she trusted herself. The organizer approached, giving her a reassuring smile. "They're waiting for you," he said. "You've prepared, you've practiced, and you've earned this. Just play from your heart, and everything else will follow." She nodded, letting the words sink in. It wasn't just about skill anymore. It was about courage, authenticity, and connection. She had already proven that she could captivate a crowd, and now it was time to take it a step further. The announcer called her name, and the applause from the packed auditorium rose immediately. It was deafening, a mixture of anticipation, excitement, and respect. She walked onto the stage, heart pounding, and took her place at the grand piano. The lights warmed her face. The audience's eyes seemed to sparkle in curiosity and admiration, and for a moment, she allowed herself to take it all in. She closed her eyes, placing her fingers gently on the keys. A hush fell over the audience, as if everyone could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. She drew a deep breath, feeling the energy of the room, and began to play. The first notes were delicate, almost whispering. They floated into the air, filling the auditorium with a sense of calm and anticipation. Slowly, the melody grew, winding through highs and lows, carrying with it stories of struggle, hope, and triumph. Each note told a part of her journey, from the long nights of practice to the rejection she had faced, and the small victories that had kept her going. The audience listened in awe. Some sat motionless, unable to believe the beauty and emotion of her music. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, completely captivated. There were whispers of admiration, smiles, and a few tears as people absorbed the depth of what she was sharing. Every note resonated, not just in their ears, but in their hearts. She had learned over the weeks that performance was not just about technique, it was about connection. She allowed the music to flow naturally, letting it guide her fingers, her emotions, and her expression. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice that could speak when words were not enough. The audience responded instinctively, caught in the magic of the moment. The piece began to build, growing in strength, complexity, and emotion. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note carefully placed yet filled with freedom and spontaneity. The music carried a story of resilience, a story that everyone in the room could feel but few could articulate. It was as if her soul was speaking directly to theirs, without barriers, without expectation, just pure emotion. At the climax of her performance, the audience held its breath. The music soared, powerful and uplifting, leaving the listeners spellbound. She could feel the energy in the room, the collective heartbeat of hundreds of people experiencing something extraordinary together. Her heart raced in harmony with the piano, and for a moment, she was no longer playing. She was living every note, every rhythm, every emotion that had brought her here. Then, with a delicate flourish, she ended the piece. The last note lingered, a soft echo that seemed to suspend time for a brief moment. Silence followed, a profound pause as the audience absorbed what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began to build. One by one, the claps grew louder, until the entire auditorium erupted in cheers. The sound was overwhelming, joyful, and genuine. People stood, whistled, shouted words of praise, and some even wept openly. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and the energy in the room became electric. She opened her eyes, blinking through the tears that threatened to spill, and realized she had done it. She had touched every heart present, not just with music, but with courage, persistence, and authenticity. The organizer came forward, clapping with genuine admiration. "You've done something incredible," he said. "This is a moment that will be remembered, and you've inspired everyone here. We were wrong to doubt you. You belong on this stage and so much more." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving me the chance, for believing in me when I was unsure of myself." The music, it just needed a voice. After the performance, people flooded the backstage area, offering congratulations, sharing words of admiration, and extending opportunities. Event coordinators, music producers, and even journalists approached her. They wanted interviews, recordings, and collaborations. She listened to them patiently, feeling a mix of excitement and humility. She had entered a world that once felt impossible, and now it was open to her in ways she had only dreamed of. A young man with a camera approached and asked, "Would you let me record your next piece? People need to hear your music to see your talent. It's extraordinary." She nodded, smiling. "I'd be happy to," she replied. Later, she took a quiet moment alone, sitting at the piano once more. The room was empty now, and the lights were dim. She played softly, letting her emotions flow without performance or expectation. It was a moment of reflection, of grounding herself amidst the whirlwind of praise and attention. She thought about how far she had come, from being told she couldn't, to standing here, sharing her gift with the world. She remembered the faces of those who had doubted her, the struggles she had endured, the hours of practice, and the countless moments of fear and uncertainty. All of it had led her here, to a stage where her music could be heard, felt, and appreciated. She realized that her journey had never been just about talent. It had been about resilience, courage, and the willingness to keep going even when the world said no. The days that followed were filled with new experiences. She performed at more events, met more mentors, and continued to grow both as a musician and as a person. Each performance was a reminder that her persistence had paid off, that her voice mattered, and that she had the power to inspire others. People began to recognize her on the street, thanking her for sharing her music, for reminding them that dreams were worth pursuing. She received letters, messages, and invitations from all over the city, each one a testament to the impact she had made. She had become more than a performer. She had become a symbol of hope, courage, and determination. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, she sat by her piano and reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that the music was more than a career or a stage. It was a lifeline, a way to express herself and connect with others. She had learned that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of perseverance, courage, and authenticity that made her extraordinary. Her story began to spread, not just in the city, but through social media and word of mouth. People shared videos of her performances, telling the story of the woman who had been told she couldn't perform, yet had silenced the crowd and inspired thousands. She received invitations to perform in other cities, to teach, to collaborate, and to share her story with the world. Through it all, she remained humble and grounded. She remembered where she had started, the doubts she had faced, and the small victories that had carried her forward. She never forgot that music was her first love, her safe place, and her voice. Every performance, every note, was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. Months later, she was invited to a major event in the city's largest auditorium. The audience was massive, the lights were bright, and the pressure was immense. But she was ready. She had grown through every challenge, every rejection, every triumph. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, carrying with it the power to move, inspire, and connect. The audience was mesmerized. Every note, every chord, every melody spoke of her journey, her courage, and her talent. People laughed, cried, and whispered words of admiration. When the final note echoed through the auditorium, there was silence, followed by the loudest, most heartfelt applause she had ever experienced. She had done it. She had proven, beyond any doubt, that her talent, her courage, and her perseverance could change lives. Later, as she walked home under the city lights, she smiled to herself. She had come a long way from being told she couldn't perform. She had turned rejection into opportunity, doubt into determination, and a dream into reality. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she had proven to herself and the world that nothing could stop her when she followed her heart. Sitting at her piano that night, she played softly, savoring each note. The music was hers, but it also belonged to everyone who had listened, believed, and been inspired. She realized that her story would continue, growing with each performance, each listener, and each moment of courage. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning of something truly extraordinary.